Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on uranium today as uranium pushes through $73 a pound. So we are going to hear from F3 Uranium Chairman and CEO Def Randhawa and the President Ray Ashley. So during today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook, and then we'll take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this F3 Uranium webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the corporate presentation. That can be found on the company's website, f3uranium.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the individual needs or of particular needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud webinar website for specific disclosures on F3 uranium. So with that, I now turn it over to Devin Ray to update the audience on the company. So take it away, guys.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all of you taking time to listen in. I know these aren't exactly the most exciting market times. We're all trying to figure out what's going to happen next in the Middle East, and more importantly is, the bigger player is going to be coming in, and therefore we're going to see $150 oil. So I think I am with all of you that are shocked to see what's going on over there, lives and being lost needlessly, and also on our own pocketbooks. It's the worst conditions the TSE venture market's been, I think, around 2007. So all the stocks were needlessly are falling off because of fear. So those of you who are listening in, kudos to you for taking time away from the red on the screen to listen in. F3. We are going to provide an update of what we're doing right now and what we plan to do to advance the projects. As most of you know, we've got these two systems, and what are we going to do with them? That's the question. But before I jump into that, I want to give a bit of background on the company itself, and there's our legal disclaimer. I've been in the uranium business space since 1996, and I've never seen a perfect storm for clean energy as I do today, which is nuclear power. I look at the U.S. and I see the Democrats wanting nuclear power and pushing for it, supporting it because they want to see clean energy. I see the Republicans pushing it because they want security of supply. They don't want to see what happened in Germany with Russia controlling, and now Russia has a huge play, has a huge part of the uranium cycle. So, and that's because we have a world crisis for energy. A third of the world doesn't have power. If it does, it's intermittent or it's brownouts and etc. So we need power, all the power we can find. And right now, and Germany knows that over 50% of their power comes from where? Coal. A country that was supposed to be the bastion of clean energy, and how Merkel got elected. Yet they're the worst polluters right now per capita. And it's because they believe renewables could step in for fossil fuels. Well, that was pretty foolish, because it can't. It'll be a transition, but it's going to take a lot more time and a lot more money than people think. That's my own view. I'm not an expert in it, but I've been watching people talk about renewables and etc. It worries me just EV vehicles, how we find any energy for them. We've already got a world crisis going on. And I'd encourage you To go through to a bit more on some of these items we've got up here, where CNN, Reuters, New York Times, Bloomberg all talk about the energy crisis that's coming and that's already here. And that's why, if you look at the worldwide nuclear market, you see how many are in operation, how many more are needed and plan to come in. Back home, you look at California, and California, is leaving theirs on that they were going to turn off. You've got, one day Newsom will tell everybody, hey, we have more electric cars. And, 2 days later, he asks people not to charge their cars because they don't have enough power. They might have a brownout. And nothing worse for a politician than a brownout. So basically, nuclear power demand continues to rise. And, that's where, because there's no need to talk about F3 if we don't talk about uranium. And why do we need uranium? Well, we need nuclear power. This is why. So like I said, environmentalists are now supporting it, and that's made it a lot easier for the politicians. One of the things that I think that can really jumpstart it and turbo start would be the small modular reactor SMRs. And a number of people have said, hey, we want to support it. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. For example, I think a simple answer would be for the Athabasca is to lend a hand to their friends in Fort McMurray and get a reactor built there. And that'd be a fantastic idea. That would get rid of all that diesel fuel that we're pumping into the air. Why we call F3 even? Because this is the third company that we have found a deposit in. If you go back to in 2007, since then, if you look in your account today, you'd have some shares of Energy Fuel, some shares of Denison, FCU, and F3. We started off with Strathmore. We spun out the Canadian assets into a company called Fission Energy, to a joint venture with the Korean nuclear facility. We made a discovery. That was sold to Denison, so we got shares of Denison. U.S. assets in Strathmore brought in shares from Energy Fuels. So we've got those two. And then out of that, we spun out FCU, which spun out F3. So that's one of the reasons we have a lot of shares out, because these shares represent all the way back to Strathmore. So that's what F3 means. So, and I want to point that out because, when a group of geologists or somebody say we're going to do X, Y, Z, well, you have to ask yourself, can they do it? Well, we have shown now for the third time we can find. Now the question is, can we grow it? And I believe that we can. We have as good a chance as anybody because I think we understand uranium both at the unconformity and in the basement. We found both kinds of deposits. We believe we can grow it, and unfortunately, expectations of retail is not always realistic, because it's if it was easy, everybody would have done it, but very few people have found one. Nobody had found two deposits until Ray did, and no one's found three until Ray and Sam and Ross and the team have been together in different ways. So it's very hard to find uranium in the basin because you're down 300 to 600 meters down. You can't see anything. So absolutely, we want to. No one's more excited than we are, but we also have to realize there are steps to take before you drill. Drilling is super expensive up in Canada, and so you got to be careful. You can blow $1 million very quickly. You're better to spend some time doing other things and narrow in where you're going to drill next. And we choose the Athabasca, for some of you don't know, because of the grades. There's nothing like it. The grades are 10, 20 times higher in the rest of the world. More importantly, it's a great safe jurisdiction. We're always going to have issues, but at least there's a system in place to deal with them. Not what happened in Niger, where guns come flying in and and suddenly the government is gone. If there was an Oscar show, Fission's team would have won every award. We would have swept them. We won every award possible: mining person, entrepreneur, northern, you name it. It just means we've got a good track record. These are our projects. How does David beat Goliath? Well, David beats Goliath by thinking differently. There would be no Arrow, no Triple R, if Ray and the team don't try something a little different, which was to look for surface indicators like other uranium. They're looking for they're looking for boulders or outcrops of uranium. And we flew an airplane really close to the edge, which we thought were closer to the surface on the edge of the basin. And sure enough, we found a bunch of boulders, which led to Triple R, which led to Lee and the group getting funded and then drilling over the Arrow. So, it's ideas that have consequences, especially ideas like this. And without disclosing, we're doing some things right now that are pretty radical to help us find another deposit, which we can't talk about, but for competitive reasons. There are a number of steps you have to go through before you start drilling. All uranium has to have a structure. It has to have graphite, and then we do ground geophysics. And I encourage you to go through this. And you have to tick all these boxes before you drill. And a lot of people drill because that's what investors want: drill. But that's not always the best thing to do, because you can blow a lot of money and miss the deposit. And maybe sometimes take 16 holes at 300,000. That's $5 million before you got to discovery. That's a lot of money to have drilled and not found it, but that's what Triple R was. So that's what I was saying. These are all the boxes you want to tick before you drill. We're getting close on Murphy Lake, and we're looking forward to doing some drilling there very soon. We do have 16 projects. Just to give you an idea how good a discovery hole this was, on F3, you can see we had 15 meters over 65,000 counts. That's pretty significant compared to other discovery holes. And they all went on to, all those were great deposits. Hurricane, Triple R, and Arrow. No, it's just saying we had a pretty good start. These are all our projects. As you can see, there's 16 of them. They're well spread out. They weren't picked and we all bought them from the government. When we say we acquired them, it isn't we bought them from other individuals. We own them ourselves from the government. It means it costs us pennies. And we're able to do that, again, because I think we have a smart group of people with good fast fingers on the keyboard to make sure we get them. So these are all our projects. We plan to not just explore, but we have other things that we want to do. We're going to do some prep work on Hardy Bay, Lazy Edward, Murphy Lake, and obviously continue on with JR discovery. And so Hardy Bay sampling. So we're getting all these other projects ready to be drilled, and it takes some steps in between. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to hand over the presentation now to Ray to talk a little bit about our PL property. I don't know how much time we have, but essentially, we made a big discovery at the very tip of the A1, but since then we have now found another structure a few meters away, 400 meters away, and that's another one. We still haven't figured out how big it is yet. We think it's bigger. And more importantly, the last news release showed us there was a tremendous amount of alteration and bleaching. That's what you look for. So we know there's been this whole bunch of uranium has run through there. The question is, where is it? And that's what we're going to talk about, what we're doing at JR Zone itself, but more importantly, what are we doing at A1B, and why we're excited about that. On to you, Ray.
Thanks, Dev. I'm going to try and skip through some of these slides a bit quickly. This just shows you where JR Zone is located relative to Triple R and Arrow, so 25 kilometers to the northwest, quite close. That's what the ultra high grade core looks like with the mineralization. And that's really a key to me. It's wide mineralization, but that ultra high grade core speaks to the tenor of the mineralization. That's the fluids and the processes that have resulted in the JR zone. That speaks to me really for the potential that it's a large system, and that's a positive thing. And what we found, as Dev mentioned, that the south end A1B conductor, that's 2.6 to 3.5 kilometers south of the JR zone, we're seeing really good signs for nearby mineralization, and I'll try and concentrate on that. So here's just what the drills look like. We drill with a diamond drill and a sonic drill. The sonic drill is to get straight casing rapidly through the overburden. The holes here at JR, this is JR, are quite shallow. So it was taking 2.5 days to drill a hole. Down at A1B, where we're focused on what we think, we're very excited by what we see, and we think we're close to another pod of mineralization. There, the holes are taking a week or more to drill. A lot of that is because the holes are deeper, but also because the alteration that we see in the sandstone is very intense. The sand is loose, so there's a lot of core loss. It means that hydrothermal fluids have dissolved the matrix of the sandstone, so it makes drilling very hard. So while the signs are really, really encouraging for close nearby mineralization, the drilling is also difficult. Okay, so just to show you on a map, JR zone is at the very north end of the A1, these dashed lines, the A1 and A1B conductor. So you can see the little red stars on A1B, and that is sniffs of radioactivity, sniffs of mineralization, 800 meters apart along this A1B conductor. Especially near hole 102, we see really intense dissolution and alteration in the sandstone, which is quite thick there, more than 200 meters thick. And in the basement, we're seeing wide alteration in the basement. So the corridor is wider, and there's multiple shear zones in this south end. And we see lots of clay alteration and bleaching. And that's why we're quite encouraged that that we stand to be close to another zone of mineralization. So right now we have 2 drills, diamond drills. We're still growing the JR zone. We've had a few good intersections. They're still open. The mineralization is opened up and down dip on several of the section lines. So one drill is continuing at JR. We also have a drill down there at A1B. And we have slowed down the drilling. The reason for that is because, as I mentioned, the drilling is difficult. So it's costly. It's wide, this shear zone that we're seeing. So what we're trying to do is set ourselves up for the winter program. So we're trying to understand. We're drilling more slowly and methodically to understand A1 and A1B. We flew a modern airborne EM survey this summer, and that we've got the 2D data from that survey that's being interpreted. We're quite excited by what we see. The previous airborne EM was flown in 2008. Now we've flown modern. It's modern, and it's a different type of EM. And really, what we're seeing is that this A1 and A1B conductor, where previously the previous airborne and ground EM had it at a strike length of 3.6 kilometers. Now we're pretty convinced, the geophysicists that consult with us, pretty convinced that shear corridor, the structural corridor, is going to be several kilometers longer. That's in the process of being interpreted. Obviously, the key here to me is how many is to find the next pod of mineralization, the next zone. And, how many could there be along this structure? We don't know. So the airborne's being interpreted. That'll lead to us doing follow-up ground geophysics. There has been no geophysics done on this suspected extension of the corridor. That ground geophysics looks for the conductors. It looks for alteration. It looks for physical property contrasts in the rocks. And that's what really provides the drill targets. That alteration we're seeing in the sandstone, the geophysics we're doing is going to try and target that and look for where that alteration may be more intense. And what's important is the ground geophysics we're planning right now is a 3D survey. And that is because the zone we found, well, it's a 3D body. And so there's 3D resistivity stands to provide better targets. It's it's more costly than conventional resistivity. But as Dev says, the cost of one drill hole can provide really cutting edge data. I'm a geophysicist myself. We've looked at a lot of geophysics over these deposits. This is the third one that we're working on. And it's really what guides us. We're hoping, and it's done it in the past, is what'll guide us to the next zone if it's there. But really, I'm very excited, and the team is really excited by what we're seeing down at A1B. I think I'm going to skip ahead and just show sections so that I can explain the why we're so encouraged by A1 and A1B at the current time. So that's just JR. This is what the high-grade core looks like in those green boxes. I'm going to skip ahead. This is the cross-section of the discovery hole. That's line 0. And what you can see is a lens that's in the basement, 45 meters up and down the dip of the shear zone. That's the brown rocks. And that lens is going to come out of the page at us. I'll just walk through sections, but I'm not going to really stop because I want to get down to A1B. So I'll first walk you through the JR zone where we're continuing to drill. And I'll try and point to, some of the recent holes. You can see this hole 101 is a recent hole that's expanded the mineralization up dip in the shear zone. So that's a very recent hole. And that's what one of the drills is continuing to do now. So I'll just skip. You see line 45 south, and you can see that the mineralization is quite close to the unconformity. There's still the potential for flat lying mineralization at the unconformity. You can see that some holes now have tested for that without finding anything yet. That doesn't mean that there is not an unconformity component. We continue to consider for that and plan for that. So now you see line 60 south, that's where we had the strongest hole, mineralized hole. And again, you see there's quite a wide up and down dip, the mineralization. So we go to 75 south. This is still all at JR zone. 105 south, that's as far as the high grade core goes currently. This is 120 south. So you can see the JR zone is about 150, just a bit over 150 meters in strike length. So this is 135 south, and suddenly I'm going to take you 2.6 kilometers south of JR. Right now, this section line is 2.6 kilometers south of the cross sections I was just showing you. The yellow shear zone is now the A1B shear zone, and this is at its north end, and hole 95 is the one where there was a sniff of radioactivity, that blue bar. Now I'm going to take you 840 meters south of that. And this is 3.4 kilometers south of JR. And what you see, these brown bars in the sandstone is yellow here on this cross section. So you can see the sandstone is thick. It's more than 200 meters in thickness. And that brown on the drill hole traces is core loss. So that means that sandstone, the matrix of the sandstone, there's dissolution of that matrix. And again, there's the A1 shear zone. It's difficult for us to we're trying to pin down the shear zone in this neck of the woods. The rocks are so altered in the basement there's multiple fractures that we're seeing in the basement rocks. All that alteration in the sandstone, intense bleaching and shearing and alteration in the basement and the sandstone. It really that's really the signs that we look for with the geophysics and with the rocks themselves. And the fact that there's sniffs of radioactivity 840 meters apart. And that's one of the difficulties now. We've got strike length, so we have to find that zone where along strike. And A1B is 1.1 kilometers long. The new geophysics suggests it could be several kilometers longer than that. That's being established right now. We still don't have the 3D inversion. We're close to getting that airborne data. That's going to be the key, really. We're working now with the 2D information. But there's two things. It's where along strike, but also where laterally. And now the structural corridor, where at JR, it's quite narrow. It's in the order of 30 or 40 meters wide. Down here at A1B, we're seeing structure that has a width of several hundred meters. So really, that's where we're at. We have one drill down here currently drilling at A1B, and a drill at the JR zone still filling in at the periphery of that zone. So and the geophysics is being interpreted. The airborne, we're going to be starting ground geophysical surveys this fall into the early winter, and that's what's going to give us drill targets. We want the best drill targets we can have. These drill holes take a long time to drill. They're expensive. The key is to tag into the next zone. If we can do that, then we will be off to the races defining it. So that's where we're focused. We're focused to find the next zone of mineralization. That's really where we're at.
Great stuff. I don't know, is there anything else that, David, you want us to comment more on, or I see a couple of questions.
Yeah, guys, why don't we move on to the Q&A session? So thanks for the presentation. Informative as always. I think I learn something new every time I see you guys talk. So reminder, everybody online, you can type your questions into the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. So we do have several questions already, guys, but I would like to start it off a little bit more broad, talking about the market. Uranium spot market appears to be hot, given that we've seen prices rise up over $73, or at least $273 on Friday. But the uranium stocks really haven't enjoyed that same momentum here. Are there any real reasons for this?
Well, I think it's just fear. I think it's overall liquidity crisis, and especially stocks that have liquidity, they're going to get hit the hardest. Our stock has a lot of liquidity, so we're going to get hit. I think any stock that offers liquidity without crashing too much, people will dump that stock because they got to get into cash. So I think it's the overall concerns at what's happening in the Middle East. The big question is, it's not just what's happening here. Other players who are all puppets. Hezbollah is a puppet for Iran. So I think people are concerned if, it's not just Hezbollah that's coming in, that's Iran that's coming in. So I think that's why, Biden and et cetera, and trying to talk to China and Russia and trying to keep them out. But they all have their proxy fighters in there, and that's what the big concern is, that it's, it's there, but there's a lot of money flowing into what makes all that go. So I think, unfortunately, and it's even more frustrating for us because, we just did a deal with Denison to buy a small percentage of us at 58 cents, and our stock's now 36.38. We were 45 then. So why are we off 18%? It's just pure fear in the overall markets, and that's what is going on. That's why I said everybody that's taking time out from, stop getting a suntan from all the red on their screen, to listen to this webinar. I commend them because they're the real investors. I see questions from Adrian and Christian. So kudos for people listening in at all. This is people often ask me, how do you make money? And I say, well, the hardest thing to do is to be greedy when people are fearful. Right now, David, this is the exact time Warren Buffett talked about. You can buy these quality stocks, whether it's Denison or NextGen or us. This was a time to buy these stocks. But the concern is the overall concern in the big markets and the rush to liquidity. And some stocks offer a lot of liquidity, like ours, and so they will get hit. Not the guys that trade 5,000-10,000 a day. They won't get hit because everybody knows they sell into that. They're hurting themselves so deeply. The investor is. So I would say that would be my view, is just a concern about the Middle East becoming a proxy for World War III.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly something that we all worry about. Now, you mentioned Denison, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I still want to talk about the market here. The World Nuclear Association fuel report that was put out in September was quite reassuringly positive this time around. Demand anticipated to be higher than expected. And that not all nuclear utilities are going to receive the uranium they need to operate their reactors down the road. So companies need incentive to explore, to develop, to build. What does all this say for the uranium sector over the long term?
Well, it's nothing but bullish. I mean, $73. We're getting close to that magic mark of 80, which is what the U.S. needs. I think, the likes of John Cash at Your Energy and them, they're going to be turning on it, I think, as we hit 80. I think now they're starting to gear up because they'll be making money at 80, and that's good. We need to get some of these U.S. guys producing a bit. 2 years ago we had, even last year, we had a big move in processed uranium prices significantly. So I think that's got to catch up here to us too. But at 73, normally if we had a decent market, these stocks would all be up 15%, not down 15% or whatever, and et cetera. So, but man, I mean, we're getting close to the magic numbers that we all want. I wonder what will happen, David, if we get to 80 and we still have these bear markets. And I think it's going to be the elastic band. We talked about this many times. Elastic band keeps getting pulled back, and let it go. And you get these stocks that jump up quite a bit. I'm hoping that's the case.
Right. Okay. Can you discuss that investment from Denison? Why issue convertible debt financing when you already had $20 million raised via equity? And what information did Denison have access to during their due diligence? What else can they bring to the table that your team couldn't have provided to begin with?
That's a great question. Well, we did have money, but that 20 million goes into the ground. That doesn't go into, that has to go in the ground completely, but there's a lot of costs of running a public company, legals and stuff that you can't use flow through money for. So yes, we had 20 million, but that's all going to go in the ground. And what we really had was 7 or 8 million, really for working capital. And for a company with a size of 160 million, we thought it'd be good to get some more. They got to access more information than the average investor. They signed what was a CA or an NDA, depending on what definition you like. Basically, they got to access, drill holes far more closely than the average investor would without signing an NDA. So, they got to do that. To me, they have lots of, they've got, we've been around as a group, 20 odd years. They've been around for 50, as a group. And I do think highly of, Mr. Case, David, and also Ron Hochstein and Lundin family. It's a good brand. And I think also it should say something to the market. that one of the world's leaders invested in a small junior. So and I mean, debentures, as interest rates continue to rise, we can lock in money at probably 5.5% soon. And as we do that, we put that money into that, and then we pay the difference, and then we can pay some of that in shares. So the cost of debt is really not that high, David, given today's environment. Had we done it when interest rates were lower, then you've got a big hit every year. But we don't have that right now. But anytime a major company invest in a small junior, people should wake up and see. There's no doubt in my mind, but I'm very biased, that I think it's the best exploration play in the basin, without a doubt. If you look at the grade, you look at the thickness, it's just not, a little bit here and there. There's a big chunk there in the JR zone. Obviously, we have to find another pod on that conductor, and or find something on the A1B. We know that that's what we have to do to get to that magical number of 100 million pounds, which is what seems to be today's standard. It used to be 50 million pounds, but today, ISO's got 50, but it's just that super high grade. It's insane. So,
I think this is probably one of the first large forays of Denison to the western Athabasca Basin as well. Plus, It has access to the McLean Lake Mill on the east. It's 22% ownership. Is there any read through on that? I know that mill and any mills on the east have not really reflected on what's going on in the west, but is there anything to read through there?
Not really. I'm more being, I guess, pragmatic and realize that what NextGen and Lee are going to do, and Ross and FCU are going to do. They're obviously 10, 13 years ahead of us in development. They're going to build it, and as they to run out of ore, maybe we'll be able to slip in there as well, because all depends on how fast NextGen and FCU mine. But if we time it right, in my head, we should just be able to come on. Whoever takes, whether it's us, whoever takes it into production, we'll be able to say there's a mill right there. So I don't see, it doesn't make any economic sense for NextGen to use McLean Lake. For me, it's more of a large company, successful company, well run, investing into the west. Maybe they're very focused on deposits that are at the unconformity, and obviously we certainly love to find some uranium for them at the unconformity. I think they would like that. They're a great group, and like I said, they had access to information that others didn't.
Okay, so another example of being few global uranium discoveries, and this can just create more competitive attention. So, okay. PLN, what can you tell us about the progress of the fall drill program? What is the goal of the program? You mentioned things are slowing down. How many holes are complete and how many remain?
Well, I just want to say before Ray answers that, we purposely slowed down to go down on one rig, and the drilling is a little slower at A1. If you remember when we first started drilling at A1, it was slow, if you remember. And then we picked up the pace as we understood how to better drill it. Well, the same thing here. We'll get better at A1B. Right now, it's really slow drilling. And we purposely gone to one because we only got so much manpower, and we want to focus on see if this crazy 400 amount of bleaching there. We believe something is in that hood, but we're not going to just start drilling blindly. We're doing other things, like we talk about ticking the boxes before we drill. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, well, that's it. There are two drills along A1 and A1B right now, two diamond drills and one sonic drill. So, but there's just one drill crew, and that's because we drill one hole at A1B, and that's where Dev is saying the drilling is difficult because of all this alteration, which is positive. The alteration is exceedingly encouraging, but it makes the drilling tough, and holes taking 7 or 8 days to drill rather than 2 days that it was taking 2 days at JR. So a 7.5 day hole is more costly. So we understand that the meterage is precious. The number of holes we can drill for the money that we have available, we have a lot of money flow through. 20 million was raised for, that we can spend in 2024. There will be big and aggressive drilling going on in 2024. What we're trying to do is we've slowed things down by alternating drilling one hole at A1B, one hole at JR. We could tag into the next zone at any moment. We're now at, I think, hole 104. We could tag into a new drill, a new pod with any one of these holes that we're drilling. We only have one drill going down there because we're trying to be methodical to understand the corridor. It's wider. We're trying to understand where laterally it's most prospective, and we're trying to understand this dissolution in the sandstone. So there's a lot of new features that we're trying to get our heads around. Once we do that and we get our ground geophysics, that's the key to provide us with the targets. If we just start keeping aggressively drilling and without good targets, without understanding the geology, the structure, the alteration, the corridor, it's very important for us to get our heads around it. That's when we'll have the best targets to be able to actually hone in on the next zone if it's there. And we sure see all the right signs. So we could find the next pod at any minute. And with every drill hole, I can tell you, I'm on the edge of my seat. But then once we have all of that information at hand, and we're going to get it starting in the fall, next winter we'll be drilling more aggressively than we are now, because we'll have all those targets. We'll have better understanding of A1 and A1B, A1B, and we'll start defining this continuation of that corridor. If you look at Triple R deposit, over a 3.3 kilometer strike length at Triple R, Fission Uranium's Triple R, there's 5 separate pods of uranium, and they're separated by hundreds of meters, many of these pods. So that's the nature of these deposits. We're seeing alteration that suggests to us that there are more pods, and that our drilling at A1B is close to one. So, I mean, we will find out, but it's about having the best targets we can have before going crazy. We're just being methodical, so that next year there'll be very aggressive programs that I'm really, I'm personally quite confident that we're going to find another zone, because I'm seeing the signs that suggest that there's more. We'll find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Drilling isn't enough. I spent 10 years in exploration before 20 years in capital markets. So a lot of time and money is needed to understand these deposits. You need to be prepared, or else you're just drilling blindly and wasting a lot of cash. So,
sorry, David. Well, I guess just so you know, people are asking, we are drilling right now. It's just going very slow. Before we were doing a hole every 2 or 3 days. These are taking a week longer. And when we get a batch of them, that's when we release them. So I know the market thinks we've stopped drilling, but we haven't. It's just that we're down to one and we're drilling slowly, and we want to batch the holes together rather than put one out, it goes up. It's not early on when you've only got 4 or 5 holes. Yeah, I can understand the need to put out news. I get that, because it's so important. But when you've gone to X number of holes, we try to batch them together for areas to better explain that area. So it's so we're not going to drill release every hole, and we try to put them in batches to better understand, so we can educate at the same time. But we are drilling right now. We won't be stopping drilling for the next year and a half. So whoever's worried about that, don't worry. We've got enough money, but we're not going to waste it. I don't want to go back to the markets and just drill it out. Oh, we didn't find anything, but we're aggressive selling, aggressively drilling. Well, that's not what we want. We want to come back to the markets, find another pod, or another system. That's how you got to find a system first, then you zero in. And that's what we had found before. We knew we'd hit on something back in 2016, but we didn't know what. We had smoke. And so that's how it works. Like you hit something and you go, okay, we don't have high grade uranium here, but there's high grade uranium somewhere in this system somewhere.
There it is.
And that's what we try to do. I know that's not what maybe investors want to hear, that we have a black box and that we know how to hit. It doesn't work like that. It's just a lot of hard work behind the scenes. But the reason I bring out the fact that we found 2 deposits before, made 2 discoveries before, turned them into deposits and were sold. And the same group of people are doing it now. And investors can pick whatever teams they want, but no one's done this successfully like Ray and Sam and Ross before that. We've been very careful about spending our money, believe it or not. And we take money from Red Cloud. We're very thankful for that large amount of cash. But we're drilling every day. We will not stop drilling. That's one of the reasons we raised this money. But it's just going a lot slower in that because of the amount of alteration, which is a good thing. If you don't have alteration, you can drill right through. That'd be easy. But
that makes a great point. Okay, if you look at what happened in 2022, Deb mentioned we had a sniff in 2014, a sniff of radioactivity at the A1 conductor. Then we drilled in 2019 around that sniff of radioactivity. We didn't give up because we saw the right signs that told us there stood to be high grade along this conductor. We then did ground geophysics in 2022. When we were planning to go back to A1, the first step was ground geophysics, ground EM and ground resistivity on the northern 800 meters of that conductor. That was the first step. That's what generated the targets. That's why 2 holes, I think it was, into that November program, it was one of the first holes in that program that intersected the JR zone, high grade, wide, beautiful mineralization. That's the recipe that led to discovering the JR zone pod, uranium pod. We're doing what works and what we've learned. This team, I'm lucky to work with a great team. We've learned all this over a number of, more than a decade now. That's exactly the recipe we understand, and we're going to follow the same steps. And that's why we're going slowly, because we want to have our best targets. That's how we're going to, that's how it led to finding JR. That's what's going to lead to finding the next zone if it's there. It's what the methodology we've learned from working with these deposits.
Now, what's your exploration plan and budget for next year, and what kind of additional geophysics surveys should we expect in order to help you further define these targets?
Look, the $20 million that was recently raised, that is flow through to be spent in 2020, the next year. So in 2024, there'll be $20 million of exploration, and most of that will be at A1 and A1B. There's other key, we have 18 properties that we've worked on for a long time. The key claims of those properties we're not going to let lapse. So there'll be some work done. My guess is not more than 2 million of that 20 million will be spent on the key claims of some of those other projects.
But
really $18 million of exploration is going to happen in 2024 at A1 and A1B, doing ground resistivity. We're working out exactly what this ground gravity. There may be, there's additional geophysical surveys we're considering. That's all being planned right now. The 3D resistivity survey is going to be starting. That's the first survey that's going to start this fall. it'll be followed by, ground gravity, which is being considered and planned. I'm pretty sure that's that as well. And EM will follow up on the resistivity. So it's what we've always done. We're thinking about new techniques now because of the unique features that we're seeing at JR. And that's what's bringing in other, and we're looking at other physical properties. And that's what it is. Physical property contrast to find what's associated with the mineralization, not just the mineralization itself. There's a lot of good science is being done behind the scenes. So we're going to come up with, the best combination of techniques we can to generate the best targets possible.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I did want, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, I saw some of the questions. We don't tend to plan out to drill out, spin anything out. We got to make sure we develop this further. Ideally, someone takes a run at us, takes us out, and we would try then to negotiate keeping the non-PLN projects. That would be ideal scenario, and we go on to F4. That's
done that in the past.
Yeah, we've done that in the past. We did it with F1, F2, and now F3. We move on, but I think it's too early in the game to be thinking about that. And but we'll take 10% of this 20 million and get ready to drill Murphy. And then we're looking at we have joint ventures with Traction, SKRR. We'll be drilling those hopefully next year with them. And we've got other interest people right now. These bad markets, make it hard to raise money for juniors. And it's usually other juniors that want to join venture with us. So if the markets get back in order and money comes in, we'll joint venture other projects with others. We'll definitely do that.
Yeah. When do you want to start drilling Murphy and some of those other pipeline projects?
Murphy will be next summer, would be my guess. We'll stay focused at PLN this winter again. That's where there's the, we'll be focused on PLN next summer as well. When we'll be thinking of the small program at Murphy. We'll be drilling in this winter on Hardy Bay. That's one of the option agreements that Deb was mentioning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's manpower is not that easy, as you know. It's when you say you're going to drill all the time, it sounds great to investors, but it's pretty hard on your staff. And but that's why we can't go full out. You're going to lose staff, and then you got no one to drill, no one to run the camps, and so there's a human factor that has to be considered. And right now it's very hard to find people. I don't get it. I don't understand where all the workers went. But so we've got to keep that in mind as well as how far you can push people, 12 months a year.
Yep. Right. Okay. We are coming up towards the top of the hour, so maybe just one final question here. And it's another geological question about one of the cross sections you displayed, the one that showed holes 93 and 102. Now, do you believe that the shear is up in the sandstone since you have so much core loss up there in the sandstone near the holes? Does this mean there's potential unconformity mineralization or something up and perched in the sandstone? Maybe if you follow that down dip, will you get to basement hosted shears?
That's a really good question. Yes, to us, when we see that much alteration and dissolution in the sandstone, we didn't expect there to be that much sandstone there. So we thought we were going to hit the top of the basement where we hit all that dissolution in the first hole on 34 South, 34 South, that section line. So absolutely, when we see all that alteration and intense alteration and dissolution in the sandstone, it speaks to the possibility for unconformity or perched mineralization. Absolutely. it's also intensely altered in the basement, and over a very over wide, right hole. The first hole was hit the basement 100 meters east of the main shear zone, and still the rocks were completely altered in the basement. That is, at JR, that far away from the shear zone, the rocks are fresh. So the corridor is wider down there, and it's hard to say. Certainly, the rocks down at section 3400 do speak to there being more intense alteration in the sandstone. So the potential there for unconformity or perch mineralization seems higher. But the basement looks equally, intensely altered. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know where that pod might be just so far. When we get all our geochemistry, when we get the geophysics, 3D inversions of this geophysics, when we get all of everything all the geophysical surveys we're going to collect, in combination with the holes that we're drilling across the shear zone down there, and the geochemistry that we'll get back from these holes that we're drilling this fall, all that together is going to lead to us getting a handle on where that next pod is, whether it's further down dip or up dip, or up in the sandstone. Absolutely. And whether it's on which side of the corridor, that's the next thing, because the corridor is hundreds of meters wide down there. The key is also to find out which is the most prospective, laterally perpendicular to strike. All this is what we're precisely trying to get a handle on to help guide the drilling next winter. And once we have our targets, we'll be going hard at it. Right now, we're still drilling. We could drill into the next pod tomorrow. Right. But the main thing we're trying to do is to learn. If we don't drill into it, we're going to learn. And so that we can combine that knowledge from this drilling with the geophysical surveys, the interpretation of those surveys that are coming. And it's going to be intense ground geophysics, physical surveys. We work with wonderful, very experienced geophysicists who've seen the data over a number of the deposits in the basin. And that's the key. We work with people who've been around these discoveries before. We've sought them out, and we have fantastic relationships with these people. I'm excited about what's ahead for us. And, if it's there, we're doing everything that we can to find it.
Yeah. So your area of interest may be deeper in that area, but you may need to back up the rigs and just hit that shear down in the basement rocks. But, keeping in mind, deep is relative as well. Arrow is dominantly between 400, 800 meters depth, and we're not talking about those kind of depths at this point.
Not at all. Not at all. We're down at, 300.
Yeah.
200 to 2 to 300. Yeah. I mean, conceivably, there is something deeper, and we have that in our minds. We're not restricting ourselves to 2 to 300 meters either. There is the potential for deeper, that the next zone, it isn't necessarily going to be the same as the JR zone. Its shape and how it's oriented, and really its depth. It could be anywhere within that structural corridor. So it's all about not having predisposed ideas about where it is. We have to let the data talk to us, and we have to go and find it wherever it might be, whatever its shape is, whether it is in the sandstone, perched in the sandstone, and however deep in that shear zone. We're now in that corridor, the corridor A1B, A1 and A1B corridor. That's what it is. And really, to understand the suspected extension of the corridor. I mean, if we can extend that corridor, the strike length of it increases the strike length over which there stands to be more mineralization. It's a very significant thing that, if this geophysics really has highlighted that the shear A1 and A1B system structural corridor is much longer than we thought previously. It just increases the area along which there stands to be more mineralization. So
it's 9:00, guys. We should wrap up.
Sounds good. Well, Deb, Ray, thank you very much for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you everybody else for tuning in. Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow when I sit down with Graphite Explorer ePower Resources. That's October 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and this comes on the back of China's decision to stop exporting a lot of graphite, and it's a sector it strongly dominates. So looking forward to that. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much.